Hello and welcome to another installment of the Halo lore series, the probably most awaited hype thing on this channel, even though we don't get a lot of that around here. This particular one is going to take off kind of where we left off in the Flood video, correct some misunderstandings, and alleviate some new information that has come to my attention ever since the last Forerunner saga book has been revealed. And it's going to reveal some controversial things that are considered canon that I'm not necessarily sure I like or dislike, and may change your perspective on the Flood and the Precursors and a lot of other stuff. This video is basically going to tie together the Flood and the Precursors into the Forerunners, and from here on out we're going to continue with the Forerunners into their society after this video. So again, after this video, we're going to go into the Forerunners in depth. Now, what I've done for this video is I've taken my collective opinion. After I read the books, I took my own notes, footnotes, and 3 wikis, and took the consensus concrete opinion from those, being as unbiased and factual as I can between them, despite what I liked or disliked. It's very much based on fact as much as possible as I could, again. So moving on, I'm going to read a couple of things here that have come from the wiki and myself and the consensus of information, and we're going to go on from there and explain kind of in depth what each of these means. So first off, it is revealed in the novel Halo Silentium that the Flood were once part of the Precursors, an ancient race that was said to accelerate the evolution of a species and shape galaxies 10 million years before the war between the Flood and the Forerunners. The Precursors created many races, including humanity and the Forerunners. The Precursors denied the Forerunners the mantle of responsibility and chose to pass it on to the humans, which would apparently lead to the Precursors erasing the Forerunners from the galaxy. In defiance, the Forerunners hunted the Precursors to extinction. However, a few of the surviving members of the Precursors went into hiding. Some transformed into a powdered organism until it was safe to reappear, but time rendered the powder defective and brought disease and sickness to the reconstructed Precursors. The Precursors that were left saw this as something good and vowed that none of their creations will rise and challenge them again. The Flood was unleashed on the galaxy, first starting with a spacefaring civilization of prehistoric humans. Now, in the first Flood video, I did talk about how it was a prehistoric human civilization that had been downgraded by the Forerunners to create the Flood. Now, this powder in this jar, what we were assuming was a biological component that the Flood were a biological weapon. In essence, yeah, they still kind of are technically a biological weapon if you want to think about it. They're just an accidental biological weapon created by the Precursors and are the Precursors themselves, which is where we're going to get into some things I don't like. Yes, the Flood are the Precursors. Essentially, I'm going to show you some images here, and these images are of scorpion crabs that live in the sea, and this is how they were best described as the appearance of the Precursors. They were described with the head of a tailless or a scorpion crab, and then the body was a large hulking mask that had 2 fingers and a thumb. Now, if we look at the pure form of the Flood, this is consensusly what the Flood looked like as well in the pure state. So the Flood in pure state were essentially mutated Precursors. Now, here's why I don't like this. Actually, before we get on to why I don't like it, we have to go a little bit deeper into that, the Forerunners themselves, and something called compound minds. And we're also going to get into something interesting, why this is debatable. This information is somewhat, although it is accepted as canon. Like the first 2 novels in the Forerunner saga, Silentium is framed with an in-universe conceit, being presented as a series of Forerunner logs under investigation by ONI, that's the UNSC ONI Naval Intelligence. The files in question are said to have been extracted from 2 sources, the carapace of a deceased catalog, designated Forerunner Remains number 879, and a damaged monitor. Both the Born-Stellar relation, the fictional document that encompasses the narrative of Halo Cryptum, and Oni's recovery of 343 Guilty Spark, which acts as the framing device for the plot of Halo Primordium, are referenced. To remain as an asset to the Master Builder, the Librarian proposed an expedition to a local galaxy known as Path Chthona to learn about the Flood's origins. Legend dictates that 10 million years ago, ancient Forerunners journeyed to the Path Chthona, but actual records detailing this journey have long since vanished. The Old Council approved of this adventure, and the ship Audacity was constructed for the long journey to Path Chthona. The crew consisted of the Librarian, a builder named Keeper of Tools, a miner named Clearance of Old Forests, and 2 life workers named Chant to Green and Bright to Light, Birth to Light. Arriving to Path Chthona, the crew of the Audacity would find it seemingly devoid of life. However, they discovered that the Precursor architecture existed this far out in the Milky Way galaxy. Amongst the artifacts was a vast fleet of ancient Forerunner vessels of war. The Librarian and her crew scanned the Forerunner vessels and found nothing of true interest. Any records inside had been destroyed thousands of years ago, as they were uploaded in binary. The Didact and Catalog were later on captured in the Forerunner Flood War by the Gravemind. The Didact's sanity is severely shaken by the resulting encounter. The Gravemind then reveals the true nature of the Precursors. They did indeed reject the Forerunners of the mantle of responsibility intended for the humans to hold it. The Forerunners did not accept this and drove the Precursors from the galaxy and beyond. Some Precursors survived by going dormant, others became powder that could regenerate their old selves in time, but time rendered it defective and it only created sickness and disease. The Precursors vowed that none of their creations would rise against them again, and that all life would suffer and be in perpetual agony through their new forms as the Flood. Now this is interesting to think because, as far as we know, there were still Precursors dormant. These new Flood, or these new Precursors that had came together that had been diseased and sickened and mutated into the Flood, might not have been in right mind, because this is contradictory to the ideas of the Precursors. The Precursors created the idea of the mantle of responsibility, which is that the most powerful, essentially, race in the galaxy will uphold the mantle of responsibility, which means that all races are treated equally, life is equal in all ways, and that if one race were to surpass them, and essentially take over the mantle of themselves, they were to let that happen. Now, the Precursors were going extinct, as it was, which is why they created the Forerunners and the humans to take the place of this mantle. Here's why I think the Flood are contradictory to the Precursors and not essentially what the Precursors really wanted. They were diseased and sickened, possibly mentally damaged as well. They essentially reconstructed their body out of a powdered form that had mutated over thousands of years. It is very possible that they were not in their right minds in their total conception of the mantle and the galaxy as it was, including the other races. It was shown over time that the humans might have possibly defeated the Forerunners and taken the mantle as it was meant to be. However, the insurrection of the Flood into, or the injection of the Flood into the storyline and the Flood-Human Forerunner War stopped that from happening, considering the Flood were just a massive force that neither could stop. Now, I'd supposed I had subjected that they had found a cure, the humans had. And my theory about the cure fit perfectly. I mean, it made total sense in terms of how it worked, but there was no actual cure. The Gravemind fooled everyone, including the humans, into thinking that there was an actual cure that they had discovered, when in fact the Gravemind was making a very tactile retreat into the far reaches of the galaxy and remained dormant until the time was right to strike again against the Forerunners when they least suspected it, after they had killed off the humans. That way the Flood are only fighting one war, not two. It turns out the humans were actually very effective at removing the Flood. Instead of trying to go in and save the civilization, they treated it like a contaminated situation instead of a war situation, which is how the Forerunners were treating it. They were treating it like a war, man to man, armies against armies. Humans were treating it like a contamination situation, like a virus, a plague, a disease, an outbreak, which it technically was. They did this by eradicating all life on the planet once it was affected. The Forerunners saw this as bad and that they were attacking their own civilizations, which created the Forerunner War. This gave the Flood opportunity to again retreat as the Forerunners and the humans fought against each other, and then the Forerunners later on realized that it was the Flood they were fighting against, not the humans necessarily. Now again, why I don't like the Precursors being the Flood, in my opinion, is that them being diseased and sickened, this might have essentially mentally corrupted them. And would taken their ideas away of the mantle from them. It just wouldn't have made much sense for them to go against their key belief in their society, which was the mantle. Why would their entire civilization, or what was left of their civilization, essentially turn their entire idea of responsibility to the mantle and upholding all life as one, creating new life and furthering the galaxy into destroy everything? Here's something really interesting to read, though, and this is about Gravemind, Compound Minds, and Benedict Bias, which I said something earlier about Benedict Bias and how 343 Guilty Spark and other AIs are related to Benedict Bias. That still stands, but I didn't fully explain it, which is why a lot of you are questioning it, and I understand why you're questioning it, is because I didn't fully explain it, and I left huge gaps in it. But that will come in the Forerunners series, so hold questions off about Benedict Bias and the other alien acts in the Halo rings. The Gravemind insinuated that by clinging to the legend of the mantle, the Forerunners had doomed the galaxy to eternal stagnation. The only way for the galaxy to progress was for superior beings to restart it. These superior beings, unsurprisingly, took the form of compound minds such as the Gravemind and Benedict Bias himself. Now, Benedict Bias was an alien act that was constructed for the sole purpose of defense and offense against the Flood. Benedict Bias for 43 years exchanged messages, information, talks with the Gravemind of the Flood, trying to find a weakness for the Flood that which they could attack. After 43 years, the Gravemind caused rampancy inside Benedict Bias, and ultimately turned Benedict Bias to his side to use against the Forerunners. Essentially, he knew everything. They had the ultimate weakness, which was why it was so easy for the Forerunners to the Flood to overwhelm the Forerunners. Now, here's the problem. The Gravemind insinuated that by clinging to the legend of the mantle, the Forerunners had doomed the galaxy to eternal stagnation. No. The Gravemind is insinuating something that's not true. The mantle of responsibility is that all races and all life are treated equally, and that if one were to evolve and surpass another, they are to let them and take the responsibility of the mantle with them. This means that whatever race has the greater technology will then lead into creating more greater technology to share with other races, treat all life as equal, and advance the growth of the galaxy as one. The idea that the Gravemind needed to restart the galaxy in evolutionary terms is benign and stupid. You want one sentient organism that's completely purposed to their own narcissistic views to destroy all life in the galaxy and then live off themselves as the one race in the galaxy. The Flood are seen as primeval, caveman-like. They don't really use technology. They just absorbs their host in their mind, and their collective intelligence goes to the Gravemind, which seems to have never purposed any technology or built any technology of their own accord. They simply use other technology from other races. This would insinuate that they're not actually all that intelligent in the first place, when in fact they're really not. It's only the Gravemind that is intelligent. He controls the Flood like tendrils, extra fingers. Each Flood is a finger, so essentially he has billions of fingers. And yet they still never created their own technology. They just essentially use guerrilla warfare tactics against the Floods and the humans to overcome them, targeting their weaknesses and exploiting them throughout the war. In my opinion, from a standpoint, that doesn't make sense that they would be the perfect idea to restart the galaxy. Now, essentially, a compound mind is one giant mind with thousands of minds inside of it. It would be like having 20 Cortanas in one room and then one speaker on the outside that voices all 20 opinions as one collective consciousness, concise whole opinion, not 20 different opinions. The most intellectual consensus of their ideas that they create, which is a very good thing. That's like democracy, which isn't very evident in this country anymore. Essentially, all the most brilliant minds, those that know best, coming together and deciding what is right, what is most right, and what would be best in this situation. Here's why it doesn't work in the Gravemind's case. The Gravemind absorbed all minds, all intellect, and all information. Now to the Precursors, the Forerunners were stupid. To them, they were stupid. The humans were stupid to them because they were such an advanced civilization. So when you take the minds of maybe 100 precursors that have formed this collective Gravemind and then subject it to 1,000,000 minds of Forerunners and humans, which has much less intelligence, you have a problem. You're diluting the gene pool, essentially. It'd be like taking the intelligence of 100 really smart people, pouring it into a pool, and then taking the intelligence of 1,000,000 dumb people and pouring it into the same pool. What's the general opinion going to be? The 1,000,000 dumb people. That's why I think the Gravemind is not an accurate representation of the Precursors. Not only that, but they were also absorbing the Forerunners to, again, keep in mind, while they, yes, were fighting to stave off their own extinction from the Precursors, the Forerunners also had the idea that they are the best race in the galaxy, they are the most intelligent race in the galaxy, and they are the right race in the galaxy to uphold the mantle, which violates all the ideas of the mantle to begin with. No race is better than another. All races are equal. If one race were to surpass another, it has to be let happen as for them to take over the mantle. So while the Foreigners were trying to cling to this idea of the mantle, they were also violating it in every way they possibly could by assuming they were the best. Their governmental society, their social society, and everything like that is also very contradictory and unproductive itself, which we'll get to that later on when we come to the Forerunners. That is why, in a nutshell, I don't think the Gravemind is an accurate representation of what the Precursors wanted. It was more of an accurate representation of what the Forerunners wanted as a species. Them to be the only ones, because the Forerunners were the main species that they were attacking. It was the main consciousness that was subjugated into the minds, or into the Gravemind itself. Remember, the Gravemind is a collective consciousness of everything. It is a compound mind, many minds upon one. It has millions of thoughts, not just one thought process. That is why I think the Gravemind is not an accurate representation of what the Precursors wanted. And not only that, but the Flood themselves, the Precursors being Flood are massively hypocritical, because the Flood's idea of the galaxy is that we are the one race. We are going to consume everything and create the perfect race, one race that just goes all towards one thing. The Precursors' whole idea that they ordained, their whole reason for creating other civilizations, other species in the galaxy, was for them to uphold the mantle once the Precursors had died off. I think that what was left of the Precursors once they had come to the consensus of the Flood and the Gravemind was that nothing left of anger and rage, because, hey, our entire civilization was just killed off when we were trying to help the galaxy. We were trying to make the galaxy a better place, and what did we get for it? Genocide. Could you not see the last 100 members of that existing race in the galaxy having a tremendous amount of anger and hate? And I'm using 100 members as a round number. It could have been more. It could have been 1,000. It could have been 10. we don't know for sure. And so that is my issue with the flood essentially being the idea of the precursors. The flood was a mutation of the precursors. It was a mutation that thrived because of its parasitic ways. It never directly said that other precursors came out of being dormant and looked at the flood and said, yeah, that's what we want. We want to kill off the rest of the galaxy. In fact, the Tuesday War kind of contradicts that, as the precursors come back later on in the UNSC, but we'll get to the Tuesday War when it comes to the UNSC. Because that involves precursors involved with the UNSC and ONI and everything like that. They're not too pivotal here right now. Those are just the precursors that were lying off in some dark part of the galaxy, laying dormant for a very long time. So I don't necessarily think there were other precursors that were unaffected by this that looked at it and said, yeah, this flood's a really good idea. It violates everything we've ever thought our civilization should uphold and created other races for. Everything we've worked for, this is going to undo it. The flood are going to undo it and destroy everything we've ever built. That's like kind of like building the tallest building in the world, and then right after you build it, you blow it up for shits and giggles. It doesn't work. Now, I'm not, for the reason that we're going to go into the Forerunner videos later on, I'm not going to get into the ISO didact and the didact, nor the librarian herself, or any of the other characters that were mentioned in this. Not even Benedict Bias, which I'd like to, because there are some fluctuating opinions and some questions that you guys are asking right now. Unfortunately, I can't, because I'm saving that all for the Forerunner videos. If you do have any questions about this and you would like them answered that pertain to the flood or the precursors, which we already have fully gone over, or anything that encompasses in this area that we've just gone over between the flood, Forerunner, precursor, human conflicts, please leave them in the comments below. And I'll get to them as best as I can. And if you do manage to bring any information to me that I've not seen yet, you will be cited. Also, which I forgot to do this at the beginning of the video, Megamac. He was one person that brought information to light that I had yet seen. There was one other. I'm sorry, I couldn't find your name or your comment. If I do manage to find it between now and the Forerunners video, I will promise to bring your name up and give you a nice big shout out. So yeah, thank you, Megamag, with that scary bunny face. Other than that, again, questions, comments, concerns, opinions of your own, or theories of your own off this, down below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button either. We definitely appreciate it. I'd really like to get this out to a lot more people just to see what more people think about this, my theories in general, and discussions in general. Please also go put this on your Facebook wall. Just, you know, easy share it to your Facebook wall. It'd be really nice and appreciated. Or throw it up on some forums or whatever. Just, you know, get the word out somehow. That'd also be very appreciated. I'd like more people watching this, and I would like a compound mind here, guys. That would be nice. We could have a giant Halo compound mine that wants to destroy everything in the galaxy. Anyway, I am Scout with 3 guns down, as always. The Halo lore series for the Forerunners is in works. As it turns out, the Halo lore series for the Forerunners, there's a lot more information there than I expected, again, to begin with. So the Forerunners videos are going to be 30 to 40 minutes in length, and there's going to be 3 or 4 of them. We're going to go over their society, their technology, their interactions with the Precursor humans and Forerunners leading up to this. We're going to get into some pivotal characters, too, that affected the society of the Forerunners and essentially changed their entire dynamic scape and how they turned out to be. It's very interesting to look at. This is really, the Forerunners are the first real civilization that we're going to come to in terms of the Halo timeline that have a lot of depth and complexity that we are aware of. The Precursors probably had a lot of depth and complexity as well, although not much information is known about them, not nearly as much as we do about the Forerunners. So we're going to have separate videos on the Forerunners, and I'm probably going to put it into 3 or 4 categories as to what these videos are and essentially about. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below what you think again, and please share this to your friends. That is more than appreciated than you ever know. Later on in the week, we're going to have oldies but goldies. We are also going to have your weekly Halo, which is going to be a weekly screenshot, game type, map type, and video. And I would prefer for this to be from the community, not file browser, because anybody can find anything on file browser. So if you have any files that you think might be worth showing off, leave that down in the comments below. My name is Scout with 3 Guns Down. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Hope you liked the video, and I will see you very soon.